Welcome in to Carps Corners. We're going to sit here and preview the Wisconsin-Ohio State matchup. Wisconsin coming in to Ohio Stadium, 7:30 kick, ESPN, night game, the third night game in 4 weeks. The only other option being Arkansas State, which was a noon game week 2. You've had Notre Dame, you had Toledo last week, and now Wisconsin. Probably, for all intents and purposes, the last night game in Ohio State that's going to be taking place in Ohio Stadium this year. So, look at what I'm watching for. Some Wisconsin players, who to watch over on the other side of the ball, what's going on over there, and my 3 keys to victory as we kind of get into this. So, what I'm going to be looking for to start off the game, Josh Proctor, Tanner McAllister didn't play last week. Will they ultimately return? Probably some soft tissue injuries, some things like that. Nothing serious. Ryan Day didn't seem overly concerned about it. But needing to get those guys back to full strength. This is going to be a physical matchup. Josh Proctor, big hitter. And obviously you have Lathan Ransom, who is filling in for him, who's done a great job. And then Tanner McAllister, who knows this defense really well, can provide some assistance there in the passing, but has been a very, very solid player for Ohio State through the first handful of weeks. So do those guys get in? How much do they play? And if they don't, how does the rotation work if they're not in there? Cam Martinez filled in for McAllister, but should Cam need to be play maybe on the outside, other places? We'll have to see kind of how all that breaks. Next thing that I'll kind of be looking for and diving into the cornerback situation. Jordan Hancock, has been injured. We have not seen him yet this season. He's still been battling some stuff. Cam Brown, his availability for the game. Denzel Burke has struggled a little bit so far this year. And so you like to see some other guys, potentially be able to go. Should there be struggles? Should there be guys getting nicked up? They've been kind of thin at that cornerback position. And so you've got J.K. Johnson. You've seen him play. He's done some really good things, finished camp really strong. And when he's got a chance to get out there, I think he's handled himself accordingly. Highly recruited guy. You give him the opportunities. They've been building him up with confidence. He's looked good. Like I said, Cam Martinez, another option you could potentially see outside should guys start to get nicked up a little bit and maybe not be able to go, or maybe just get fatigued. It's going to be a physical game. And we always think of being physical games being inside. It can be physical on the corners. You start filling stuff up on the inside. They pull offensive linemen around. They get fullbacks. They get running backs out on those corners. Guys get a shoulder. They get an ankle. Something could happen. Could Cam Martinez potentially move out there? He's smart enough to do it. He understands that he's gotten reps in it during camp when guys were beat up. So that could also be an option should they potentially need him. And then Jair Brown, too. Young player, freshman. Should he need to go in, they might be requiring his services as well as we sit here and try to juggle through this cornerback situation, which is why I think it's really critical for Tanner McAllister to potentially come back, because that would open up at least Cam Martinez, who's a smart guy, can do a lot of things, very, very versatile player, for him to be able to slide outside should he need to. Now, here's one of the other things. When Jim Knowles got here, running a 4-2-5, everybody's heads exploded. What are they going to do when they play Wisconsin, when you play Michigan, you play in Illinois, when you play in Iowa? Well, maybe not Iowa, because they run big people, but they don't really score the football that effectively. But what are you going to do with 5 defensive backs out there? Well, number one, you could always go to a 4-3 look. You could slide Cody Simon in there, who's been rotating with Tommy and Steele and has done a really good job. Was near the top of the team in tackles last week. And so you throw in a 3 linebacker set, you pull Tanner McAllister off of the field, and you do that when you need to, if you feel like you're getting gashed. Or another guy that came in the same class as Cody, Court Williams. Court Williams, 220-ish, probably 2.25-pound safety, big guy, about as big as the linebackers. So do you slide him in there? He can provide coverage on tight ends. He's really athletic. He understands, the safety positions well. And so you go with, quote, maybe more of a bigger safety, and that gives you that ability to fill on the run and gives you that run support that you're looking for. And so I think those guys you have to keep an eye, could be 2 critical pieces, depending on how the game's going and what Wisconsin ultimately lines up in. They could help solve that run problem. Now, Wisconsin has thrown the ball more this year, and they've done so with Graham Mertz. So we'll get into that, and we'll talk a little bit about who to watch. Um, one other thing for Wisconsin, though, as we sit here and look at this, Wisconsin is decimated on the back end. Cornerback, redshirt senior Alexander Smith, he's out. Sophomore safety Hunter Woller's out. Redshirt senior safety Travion Blaylock, he's out. So like 3 significant contributors, and Blaylock's out for the whole season, I believe, are going to be gone down for this game. And so we'll talk about how that impacts what Wisconsin's trying to do and how Ohio State can ultimately exploit that. But who ultimately to watch on this Wisconsin team? Graham Mertz, like I said, he was supposed to be the answer a couple years back. I know Ohio State liked him. They were recruiting him. He chooses ultimately to go to Wisconsin. And Ohio State, ends up getting CJ, and they're very happy with him. And he's the guy that they wanted, but they did like Graham Mertz as well. Very, very talented player coming out of high school, 4-star guy, hasn't really performed at that level. Statistically this year, he's thrown for over 700 yards. They're close to 700 yards, 6 touchdowns, 2 picks, 70% completion rate. But here's the problem. Like, a lot of that came against New Mexico State and Illinois State. Teams they beat 66-7 and 38-0. Against Washington State, offense wasn't nearly as effective. And so keep that in mind when you look at those stats. But Graham Mertz, if you impact him and you're able to affect him, historically the last couple of years, he's given you the ball. Graham Mertz will throw you the football if you're able to get pressure. And so that Buckeye defensive line going to be paramount. Can Mike Hall ultimately go? Will JT Tuimoloau, will Jack Sawyer be able to get pressure off the edge? Zach Harrison in the mix, Tyleik Williams up the middle. Can those guys get some push and get some things going? Running back, Braylon Allen. Wisconsin always relies on their running back. Big time guy. They always have someone who's elite back there. Braylon Allen's good. He's not Jonathan Taylor. He's a good player, but I wouldn't define him as one of the elite running backs that Wisconsin's had, a 1st-round draft pick guy that you're going to take probably in the top 20, 25 picks. But Braylon Allen, he's got 50 carries on the season, 322 yards, 5 touchdowns. Like I said, they were running the ball well against Washington State, but a lot of those stats also came against inferior opponents. The one Power 5 they play, things kind of drop a little bit. And then defensively, and this is going to be critical because this Jim Leonard defense is really stinking good. And he's one of the best defensive coordinators you're going to see at being multiple, mixing it up, and covering up for deficiencies. Nick Herbig, linebacker, 11 tackles, 4 sacks, really, really talented player. NFL caliber guy. I mean, I don't know if I'd go as far as to say he's TJ Watt, but he's TJ Watt-esque with what he brings to the table. He's going to make a lot of tackles. He's their playmaker, but really he provides vertical penetration and can impact the quarterback, sacks, tackles for loss in the running game. So it's another big element that they potentially have with him out there. So keep an eye. I believe he's number 19, I think, 18, 19. So keep an eye on Nick and what he's ultimately able to do. Now, we'll talk about the 3 keys to victory here of what the Bucks ultimately need to do. Number 1, stop the run for Wisconsin. I mentioned Braylon Allen, what he's able to do. Wisconsin is built around big offensive linemen and a physical downhill running game. They run a lot of gap scheme, which means they're getting big double teams, trying to push guys off, create angles. They're going to pull offensive linemen around. They're going to have a fullback, insert him in there. And so it's not just always a pure zone. They're going to try to create angles and get downhill on you and punch holes in your defense. Last year, that gave Ohio State problems. This year, they've been much more stout, but this will be the biggest test up front for Ohio State to date. You saw a lot of what Notre Dame did early on, trying to get in 2 tight end personnel and do some different things, 3 tight ends even on the field, and create extra gaps. I felt like it was a great learning experience, especially for the linebackers and safeties. This will be a bigger test because Wisconsin is going to stay with the run. That is their bread and butter. They'll throw it around some, but they are going to want to try to physically dominate this game and protect the score, keep it down, and hold on to the football. Second key, you want to protect CJ. CJ has been fantastic this year, has not turned the football over yet. So you have to identify the rushers. Wisconsin, they're going to bring linebackers from all over the place. They'll have 3 guys down, 4 guys down. They're going to mix it up. And if you watch Jim Leonard in this defense, who I played against him, really good safety, played far better than his athleticism ever should have allowed him. He's a very, very talented player. He was smart. He's a really good coach. One of the best defensive coordinators you're going to find. And he's a Wisconsin alum, so he likes it there. They forced 7 interceptions, 8 turnovers this year. Now, CJ hasn't turned the football over yet. So that bodes well for Ohio State. I don't think they're going to be able to get that pressure, but protecting CJ, it's going to be on the offensive line, obviously, but you're going to have to get your backs involved. If Dallin Hayden's back there, he's a young player. Identifying the blitzers, knowing what the protections are, pass blocking is always tough for young players. Travion and Mayan, they're going to have to be very good as well. Cade Stover, if you keep him in, he's going to have to be good of knowing who to block and then ultimately executing and getting that done. I don't believe Wisconsin's going to be able to force those interceptions. Like I mentioned, they have 3 of their premier secondary players out. And so if you're bringing heat, you got to get there, and you're going to have to get there quickly, because if you don't, it's going to be Rose City over the top. Jackson Smith and Jigba, he should be back. Hopefully he's settling in a little more. We saw Julian Fleming have a big game last week. You saw Cade Stover have a big game. Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka, Ballard, all these guys. You're going to have a chance to get vertical if you can block them up. So you've got to make sure you identify the rushers, get hats on hats, and then execute your technique and give CJ time. And maybe he pulls it down a little bit. You're bringing rushers, playing man behind. You pull it down. You pick up 8 yards, 10 yards, 12 yards. You slide it out, and it's a win. And then lastly, the competitive stamina piece of it. Talked about this. Ryan Days brings this up. Competitive stamina, being able to continually replicate high levels of performance over and over and over again. All right. And so that's players, when you're playing a team that likes to pound the football and run the football, that's big, because Wisconsin's going to stay with it. They're not going to abandon it. Now, if you start getting up by 21 points, yes, they'll have to start throwing the ball more. And they've thrown it more with Graham Mertz this year in the past, and he's been okay. But they want to run the football. They're going to want to shorten the game. That's how you beat Ohio State, because they can score so many points. And so the competitive stamina, withstanding the slugfest, understanding that if you allow them to run the football, Wisconsin will continue to run the football over and over and over again. The way you get them out of it is stopping the run, forcing them to throw, scoring points on offense. You get that spread, you get them in a chase game, and now it's yours. Ohio State's been able to do that. They've won 8 straight contests. The margin of victory is pretty high, but I think a lot of it is skewed by the, whatever it was, 63-0 beatdown, or 53, whatever it was in the Big Ten championship in 14. I think that skews that margin of victory a little bit. A lot of those games have felt much closer into the 3rd and 4th quarter. And then also the competitive stamina for the fans. I mentioned it's the 3rd night game in 4 weeks. Ryan Day said he prefers the noon games, but he will get after it, and he does appreciate the night game. Gets recruits in there, the players get juiced up, especially when it's a big-time conference opponent that's going to be a slugfest. But pace yourself, fans. He said he wants it loud. He's excited for Buckeye Nation to be down there all day, ready to get excited and ready to go. And so with all of those things, Buckeye fans, enjoy it. Get down there and tailgate. I'll be down there. It'll be a great time. But make sure you're going to be able to bring that juice in the stadium. Get in there, be ready to go from Jump Street, and that's what he's wanting to see, that competitive stamina, not only from the players, but also from the fans. And then lastly, Ohio State's going to be wearing the all blacks, the black jerseys. I don't mind the black jerseys. I prefer that they keep the silver helmets. I get why you do it. It's Nike, it's marketing. You can sell the merch. Recruits like it, players like it. All those things are cool. If you're going to do it, I like it for the Wisconsin game. I like it Iowa. I like it Michigan State, Penn State. Just don't do it against Michigan. Keep the silver dome, red and white jerseys. Bring some gray on the sleeves. That would be nice. And you got the gray pants, and you're ready to rock. But the alternate blacks will be worn. And it's the first time since 2019 they're doing that for a blackout of the shoe. So, folks, if you're heading down there, wear your black stuff. It's going to be a beautiful night. High 50s, low 60s at kick. You couldn't ask for better weather in Ohio. So that ends this edition of Carps Corner, the pregame for the Wisconsin game. Hopefully we'll be celebrating a big victory. We'll break it down early next week. And like, subscribe, comment, questions you have, let me know, share with friends. And thank you for all the support, and we'll talk to you soon.